My wife and I once had a beach house, but we moved to the city. I hadn't gone back for 26 years. She went there 4 times a year. When she passed away, my kids said, "Sell that useless place." I decided to visit before selling, but when I opened the rusty gate, I froze at what was living there. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Howard, and 6 months ago, I buried the only person who ever truly understood me. Julie was everything to me for 38 years of marriage, and now I sit alone in our empty house while my own children treat me like a burden they need to manage. The phone call came at exactly 7:30 this morning, just like it has every Tuesday for the past month. Marcus, my eldest son, doesn't even bother with pleasantries anymore. "Dad, we need to talk about that beach house situation again." His voice carried that tone he used when he thought he was being patient with me. "You're throwing money away keeping that place." I gripped the coffee mug Julie had given me last Christmas, the one with our wedding photo printed on the side. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. "It's not throwing money away, Marcus. Your mother loved that house." "Mom's gone, Dad." The words hit like a slap. "Diana and I have been talking, and we think it's time you started making practical decisions about your finances." Diana. My daughter had been just as relentless as her brother, calling me every few days with the same lecture about fiscal responsibility and planning for the future, as if I were some senile old man who couldn't balance a checkbook. "The property taxes alone are costing you $4,800 a year," Marcus continued. "Plus maintenance, insurance, utilities. You're looking at almost $15,000 annually for a house you never visit." Never visit. That was the part that stung the most because it was true. Julie had gone to that beach house 4 times every year without fail. Spring, summer, fall, and once in winter for what she called her contemplation season. She always invited me, but I always had some excuse. Work commitments, even after I retired, golf tournaments, routine doctor appointments that could have been rescheduled. Now I wondered why I had been so reluctant to join her. Maybe because the house represented something I didn't understand about my wife, something private that she kept separate from our daily life together. "Your mother put a lot of love into that place," I said, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder Julie had installed outside our kitchen window. "Dad, listen to yourself." Marcus's voice grew sharper. "Love doesn't pay bills. You're on a fixed income now. Social Security and your pension aren't going to stretch forever, especially with healthcare costs rising." This was always his angle, the practical financial argument. Marcus worked in real estate development, so he saw everything in terms of market value and profit margins. He'd inherited Julie's sharp mind for numbers, but none of her warmth. "Have you even been inside that house since Mom died?" Diana's voice came through the speaker. She must have been listening on the extension from her home across town. "Because I went by there last month, and Dad, it's falling apart. The paint is peeling, there's rust on the gate, and the whole place looks abandoned." My chest tightened. Julie had always kept that house immaculate. She was proud of every detail, from the garden she'd planted along the front walkway to the rocking chairs she'd positioned perfectly on the wraparound porch. If it was deteriorating now, it meant she really was gone. "Maybe I should go take a look," I said quietly. "Why?" Marcus jumped in immediately. "Dad, you're 74 years old. You have no business driving 3 hours each way to look at a property you're going to sell anyway. Just list it with a realtor and be done with it." 74. He said it like I was ancient, like I should be grateful they were even letting me make decisions about my own property. Julie would have been furious if she'd heard the way they spoke to me. "The market's good right now," Diana added. "Properties in that area are selling for $250,000 to $300,000. That's a significant amount of money, Dad. Money you could use for assisted living when the time comes." Assisted living. They'd been dropping hints about that for months too, ever since Julie passed, as if losing my wife automatically made me incompetent to live independently. "I'm not ready for assisted living," I said firmly. "Of course not," Marcus replied in that condescending tone again, "but it's good to plan ahead, and selling the beach house would give you options." Options. They made it sound like they were doing me a favor, when what they really wanted was to secure their inheritance. I'd seen the way Marcus looked at Julie's jewelry collection when we were going through her things, the way Diana had quickly claimed Julie's good china for safekeeping. I need time to think about this, I said. Dad, you've had 6 months to think about it. Diana's voice carried a hint of the impatience she usually reserved for her teenage daughters. How much more time do you need? 6 months. Had it really been that long since Julie drew her last breath in the hospital room, her hand growing cold in mine while machines beeped their final warnings? It felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. The longer you wait, the more money you're wasting, Marcus said. And frankly, Dad, we're worried about your judgment lately. Yesterday you told me you couldn't remember if you'd paid the electric bill, but you're holding on to a property that's costing you over $1,000 a month. That hit differently because there was truth in it. My mind had been foggy since Julie died. Some days I forgot to eat lunch. Other days I found myself standing in the kitchen, unable to remember what I'd come in there to do. The grief felt like a thick blanket that muffled everything around me. Maybe Marcus is right, Diana said, her voice softer now. Maybe it would be better to simplify things. Get rid of unnecessary expenses so you can focus on taking care of yourself. Taking care of myself. Such a clinical way to describe the process of learning how to live without the person who had been my partner in everything for nearly 4 decades. I'll think about it, I repeated, but even as I said the words, I knew they wouldn't be satisfied with that answer much longer. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of our kitchen, surrounded by Julie's things. Her reading glasses still sat on the counter next to yesterday's newspaper. Her coffee mug was still in the dish drainer where I'd left it after washing it the morning she went into the hospital for the last time. Maybe they were right. Maybe holding on to the beach house was just prolonging the inevitable. Maybe it was time to let go of the last piece of Julie's world that I'd never really understood. 3 weeks passed before I finally broke down and called Marcus back. The pressure had been relentless. Daily phone calls, surprise visits where Diana would walk through the house pointing out things that needed repair, and worst of all, the subtle suggestions that maybe I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs anymore. I'll do it, I said when Marcus answered his phone. I'll sell the beach house. The relief in his voice was immediate and unmistakable. That's great, Dad. Really, you're making the smart choice here. I can recommend a realtor who specializes in coastal properties. She's very efficient. That seemed to be the only quality that mattered to my children anymore. Not sentimental value, not memories, not the fact that their mother had considered that house her sanctuary. Before we list it, I want to go down there one more time, I said, to collect any personal items that might still be there. There was a pause. Dad, is that really necessary? I mean, what could be there that's worth a 6-hour round trip? Your mother spent a lot of time there, Marcus. There might be photographs, books, things that have sentimental value. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, but don't go alone. Why don't Diana and I come with you? We can help you sort through everything. The last thing I wanted was my children pawing through Julie's private things, making snap decisions about what was worth keeping and what should be thrown away. They'd already done enough of that when we cleared out her closet. I need to do this myself, I said firmly. Dad, you're talking about a 3-hour drive each way. What if something happens? What if your car breaks down or you have a medical emergency? Medical emergency. They'd been using that phrase a lot lately, as if I were a ticking time bomb ready to collapse at any moment. Yes, I was 74. And yes, I took medication for high blood pressure and cholesterol, but I wasn't an invalid. I'll be fine, Marcus. I've been driving longer than you've been alive. That's exactly what worries me, Diana chimed in. She must have been listening on the extension again. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be, Dad, and you've been so distracted lately. Distracted. That was their polite way of saying they thought grief had made me senile. Maybe they weren't entirely wrong. I had been forgetting things, losing track of time, finding myself staring out the window for hours without realizing it. But this trip felt important, necessary in a way I couldn't explain. I'm going, I said with more conviction than I felt. Either you trust me to handle this, or you don't. Of course we trust you, Marcus said quickly, though his tone suggested otherwise. We just worry about you. Maybe you could at least let us know when you're leaving and when you get back, just so we know you're safe. Check-ins, like I was a teenager borrowing the family car. But I agreed because it was easier than arguing, and because some part of me was touched that they cared enough to worry, even if their concern felt more like an obligation than genuine affection. I planned the trip for the following Saturday. Marcus had offered to arrange for someone to drive me, but I declined. This was something I needed to do alone, without witnesses, without my children's running commentary about practicality and efficiency. The night before I left, I sat in Julie's study, looking through the photo albums she'd kept so meticulously organized. There were pictures from our early years together, our wedding, the kids when they were small and still thought I was wonderful. But as I flipped through the later albums, I noticed something strange. The photos became less frequent, and in the ones from recent years, Julie was often alone. There she was at the beach house, sitting on the porch with a book in her lap. Another shot of her in what looked like a garden, though I didn't remember her ever mentioning gardening at the beach house. In several photos she was smiling, but it was a different smile than the one she wore in our family pictures. This smile looked peaceful, content in a way that made me realize how rarely I'd seen that expression on her face in recent years. When had she stopped looking at me that way? When had we stopped taking pictures together? I closed the albums and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about those photos, about the woman who had shared my bed for 38 years, but had kept an entire piece of her life separate from me. Why hadn't she ever really pushed me to come with her to the beach house? Had she wanted me there, or had she preferred the solitude? The next morning, I loaded the car with supplies Julie would have insisted on. Water bottles, snacks, a first aid kit, and a cell phone charger. She'd always been the practical one, the planner who thought 3 steps ahead while I lived in the moment. The drive took longer than I expected. My hands cramped on the steering wheel, and I had to stop twice to stretch my legs and use the restroom. By the time I reached the coastal highway, the sun was already past its peak, casting long shadows across the salt marshes that lined the road. I'd forgotten how beautiful this stretch of coastline was. Julie had tried to describe it to me over the years, but I'd never really listened. Now, seeing it for myself, I understood why she'd been drawn here. There was something timeless about the landscape, something that made the problems of daily life feel small and manageable. The turnoff to our street was marked by a weathered sign that read Palmetto Cove, Private Road. I'd helped write the check for that sign 15 years ago, but I'd never actually seen it installed. Julie had handled all the details of maintaining the beach house, from paying the property taxes to hiring contractors for repairs. As I drove down the narrow road toward our house, my chest grew tight with anticipation and dread. What would I find there? What secrets had Julie kept in this place that she'd visited 4 times a year without me? The house sat at the end of a dead-end street, partially hidden by mature palmetto trees and overgrown shrubs. I could see Diana had been right about the property looking neglected. The paint was indeed peeling, and the metal gate that led to the front walkway had developed a coat of rust. I parked in the gravel driveway and sat for a moment, engine off, listening to the sound of waves in the distance. Julie had always said the ocean called to her, and now I could hear what she meant. There was something hypnotic about the rhythm, something that seemed to slow down time itself. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the house keys from my pocket and walked toward the front gate. My hand shook slightly as I reached for the latch. Whatever I found on the other side of this gate would change everything I thought I knew